Assignment: Personality Swap by Bellamont. Read by The Viridian Ghost. Summary: It was a normal day in Class 1A. Emphasis on the was. Really, when Aizawa was giving his lecture on the importance of personas and heroics, they should have just listened. Instead, they get to deal with a Midoriya that acts like Bakugou for the day. Hint: it's terrifying. Or, I wanted to write a personality swap story, so here's 5K of exactly that. It was a normal day when the chaos started. Emphasis on the was. Class 1A was in session, school was about to end for the day, and the weekend was only an arm's length away. The students were barely listening to their homeroom teacher, as they did their best to sneakily pack their bags. And then, abruptly, Aizawa shut off the display, facing them head-on. "All right, since you've all decided that this lesson wasn't interesting enough to keep your attention," Aizawa started, flashing his quirk for good measure. "We'll be doing a more hands-on approach for the matter." The statement managed to catch the interest of his students, the 20 kids finally giving their full attention to the man. After all, the topic had been about creating hero personas, and somehow how some heroes separate their normal identities from their hero ones by acting differently. How could Aizawa turn this lecture into an assignment? Most of you seem to act as you normally would when you are in your hero outfits, except for a select few of you, Aizawa pointed out, eyeing them with boredom. The only student that I can firmly say is creating a type of persona is Midoriya. The rest of you don't change a single thing. Most of the class shrunk in on themselves, embarrassed for not changing themselves, or, in Midoriya's case, being so obvious that his smile was just for show, just like All Might. That isn't necessarily a bad thing, just like it isn't automatically good. That way, instead of forcing you all to create hero personas, I'm going to have you put on a peer's persona. Aizawa took a moment to pause, letting his students work themselves up into a flurry of questions with this new information. "If no one but Midoriya has a persona, how are we supposed to mimic anyone?" Ashido asked, confused. "How will we decide who is who?" Ida asked. "Will we draw lots? Be allowed to choose ourselves? Can there be more than one person? Are people just going to swap roles?" Hagakure asked. "Ooh, can I be Yamomo or Deku?" "Why the fuck would you want to be someone like Deku? He just cries the whole time," Bakugou sneers, and Midoriya curled in on himself even more, if that was even possible. More questions filled the air, and a few more moments of excitement. Aizawa cleared his throat. The class quieted immediately. "I will choose who everyone gets. There will only be one of each person. I will give you your peer to copy. You may not directly say who you are. Who you are supposed to be to any of your classmates. The point to this is getting in character as best as you can, without getting into the other changing rooms, of course." Aizawa let the girls take a second to glare at Mineta, who flinched. Smirking, Aizawa added, "I will give some of you more difficult personas, ones that will directly conflict with your normal actions. I expect you all to stay in character the entire day on Monday." "Will there be a prize for the best actor?" Ashido asked, and Aizawa hummed for a minute before grinning wider. "Sure. The student who acts the most like their character gets a perfect score. The student who successfully stays away from their own persona in order to achieve their characterization gets 5 points extra credit. The person who freaks out to President Mike the most while achieving those other goals will get a free pass on any assignment of their choosing." The class perked up at the offers, and Aizawa rolled his eyes as he watched his students grow determined to win. Sitting down, Aizawa quickly wrote down each of his students' names on a little slips of paper, then passed them out. As the bell rang, Aizawa called out, "Remember the rules. Do not tell anyone who you are. Do your best, and stick with the character for all of Monday." Oh, if only he knew what chaos he had started. Monday starts about as normally as any Monday does, but it's a little off-kilter from the very beginning. Usually Ida is the first one to enter the room. However, today is different, and that is why Ochaka Uraraka is the first student to enter the classroom, half an hour early to class, like an overachieving student would be. She walks in with a stiff gait and her head held high, a tenseness in her shoulders that is never there, normally. She sits in her seat, diligently pulling out her notebook and sitting properly. Then she giggles. No one knows because she's all alone, except for Aizawa, but he's well asleep on the floor. It takes 7 minutes for the next student to arrive, only 23 minutes remaining before class. Mina Ashido walks in, steps far more graceful and less bouncy than her usual. Her hands are clasped politely in front of her, and then her small smile breaks into a careless grin as she spots her peer. "Hey, Raka," Ashido greets, a little too loud, and then she cringes. Good morning." Her voice is softer, and with a polite nod. Ashido takes her seat. 8 minutes pass, with 15 minutes to go before the bell, and more students arrive. Aoyama enters with a frown, with dark eyeshadow and mascara on, an attempt to seem goth. Sue prances into the room, giving a carefree wave as she drops into her seat. Sato curls in on himself, but still gives a warm smile as he enters. Hantasero greets everyone politely and as he tries to be more at ease. Ojiro, however, seems to have a wider, almost forced smile that seems just a little too big. 3 more minutes pass, 12 minutes remaining before the bell. Denki Kaminari comes in, mouth covered with a mask, and surprisingly quiet for once. Ijiro Kirishima walks in, waves, then pulls out a packet of sugar and pours it into his mouth, only grimacing at the taste once, to his credit. Jiro walks in, blush on her cheeks, and a kind smile on her face. Shoji walks in, freezes, then excitedly shakes his limbs, all 6 of them, as he greets them, as if he's trying to be more noticeable. Koji walks in last, still meek but trying as he gestures to the makeshift belt around his waist, then pulls out some glitter and throws it into the air. Aoyama breaks character for a moment to cheer on Koda, but Aizawa seems to be still sleeping, so his peers let it slide. 2 minutes pass, 10 minutes remaining before class. Hagakure walks in with a loud carol, before heading to her desk. Minato Minoru walks in, cut-up cords hanging off his ears, and what looks like to be 2 of his purple balls stuck to his chest. If Uraraka throws the boy out the window, claiming that it was her duty as class representative, no one bats an eye. She's staying in character, after all, hand chops and all. A minute passes, with only 9 left. Shoto Todoroki walks in, calm as usual as he sits at his desk. Then he pauses, blinks, and says, "You guys are all so manly," in the most unenthusiastic tone the phrase has ever been spoken in. Another minute goes by, with 8 remaining. Minato runs back into the classroom, quirk supplied balls noticeably absent, and Uraraka lets him sit down. Tokoyami follows a second after, looking at them all with disinterest before sitting at his desk. He doesn't say a word, not one. No one is quite sure what character he is. 2 minutes pass, 6 are left. Momo walks in, expression one as regret as she walks in front, before schooling into determination. "My apologies," Yayorozu whispers, and that's the only warning Ashido gets before the normally prim and proper girl tugs at the other's skirt, lifting it a mere centimeter before rushing off, face bright red and full of remorse. The class stares for a moment before everyone forces themselves back into character. sure that their shock will end there. A minute passes, 5 remain, and the class is proven wrong as Katsuki Bakugou walks in, his head down, shoulders drawn in, and for once the boy seems to have found the belt in his tie. His peers blink at how poorly the tie is done, surprised. Explains why he never wears a tie, Hagakure remarks, voice passive, as the class is surprised when Bakugou doesn't shout before remembering the goal of today. 2 minutes pass and only 3 remain. Tenya Ito walks in looking displeased at being so late, even as he tries to relax. Sadly, the boy can't seem to untense his shoulders as he shoots a wide smile at his peers before dropping into his seat. Another minute passes and the class grows restless. No one is quite sure how to talk to their peers because they can't quite tell who is who. A few are obvious, with Yaoyorozu as Mineta, the poor girl, and Kirishima as Sato, but too many are just acting shy, and some are just smiling wider than usual. It's not much of a change. The final minute passes and the bell rings. Aizawa stands up looking around. "Good morning, students," Aizawa says, and that's all that he gets a chance to say before the door slams open. And then Izuku Midoriya walks in, his normally bunched-up, too-short tie completely forgotten, shirt untucked and his pants starting to sag. The class stares at him as he walks into the room, without so much as a hello or an explanation for his lateness, nonchalantly making his way to his desk, or so they thought. Midoriya stops a desk too early, glaring at Bakugou, with a look of open disdain that no one from Class 1A has ever seen on his face before. And then he opens his mouth. "What the fuck are you doing in my seat, shitty nerd?" Midoriya says, his lips part into a sneer that is far too similar to Bakugou's for his peers' liking. "Get the fuck up, Deku." Bakugou, apparently Midoriya, scrambles out of his seat, eyes wide and teary. "Right, Kachan." He bows awkwardly before moving into Midoriya's normal spot, trembling even after Midoriya drops into the blonde seat, a smirk on his face. "No way," Ashido whispers, accidentally breaking character, and Aizawa shoots a glare at her that shuts her right up. "Bakugou," Aizawa starts. And to Class 1A's surprise, Midoriya looks up without hesitation, but with a look that seems to try and defy authority, without words. "Try not to be late next time?" Midoriya rolls his eyes. Somehow the action is enough to further and shake their peers. "Yeah, whatever. Let's just get this started or something." He sounds bored, as if he's already ready to ditch class and go back to the dorms. Aizawa does indeed start class, brushing off Midoriya. The rest of the class slowly looks away from the greenette as the day continues. The day continues, but it's one of the most bizarre days that Class 1A has ever faced, and perhaps ever will. If one were to ask the students what they considered the oddest moment, it's unclear what would be the final, definite answer. Some consider that their peers' entrances to be the most shocking, as it was the first impression they all got of one another, and some personalities were just so different than they'd be ingrained in their heads forever. Ashido would point to this exact moment as Midoriya and Bakugou's interaction had shaken her to her very core. However, others may point to different moments of the day. Hagakure would point to English class when Yamada-sensei freaked out upon hearing one of his favorite students, yet again Midoriya, talk. "All right, listeners!" Yamada cheers, smacking his hand on the board with far too much enthusiasm for a Monday morning. "Who can tell me what the correct way to arrange these following words?" He gestures to a cluster of words that he's written on the board, all in English, of course. "Bonus points if you can explain why, of course." The room is silent, each student trying to figure out how they're supposed to act. Ashido for once cringes as she realizes that she should raise her hand, as she's Yaoyorozu. But she doesn't actually know the answer, which is quite un-Yaoyorozu-like in her opinion. On the other end of the spectrum, Ida practically vibrates in frustration, knowing that Kaminari never answers unless he absolutely has to. And even then, the answer is usually thrown together. It's rather frustrating in his opinion, and Ida makes a mental note to talk to the electric boy about the issue, and then promptly wonders if making mental notes is breaking character or not. As Ashido panics internally, and Ida has a mental crisis that starts to edge towards mental breakdown territory, Yamada decides to call on one of his favorite students, oblivious to the reaction he'll get. "Midoriya!" Yamada cheers, and doesn't notice how Bakugou glances up after a mere second of hesitation. "What do you think it is, buddy?" Midoriya slumps further into his seat, eyeing the board with obvious boredom, as Bakugou makes a show of biting his lip, puffing out his cheeks in contemplation. Bakugou starts, but it's too soft, and Yamada doesn't notice. "Midoriya?" Yamada tries again, and his smile drops into a soft frown when Midoriya once again doesn't pay any mind to the teacher. "Listener, are you all right?" Here, Midoriya does look up, but is to roll his eyes and scoff. Yamada pauses at the noise and opens his mouth to ask a question when Bakugou finally speaks up. "Sensei, the answer would be, I will run with my friends on the Friday after next, right?" Bakugou looks at Yamada with an obviously hesitant expression, and a few students have to hold back their laughter when they see the confused look on their teacher's face. "Ah, yes," Yamada says after a moment, nodding. "That is correct, Bakugou. Thanks for giving the answer." "I didn't fucking answer, but go off," Midoriya mutters under his breath, and those nearby do their best to hold in their laughter. Yamada blinks, looking at Midoriya with a confused gaze. "Listener?" Yamada asked, eyebrows crease as he slowly asks, "What did you just say?" Midoriya shrugs, the moment fluid and lazy, raising his voice, and repeats, "I didn't fucking answer, but go off." His lips twitching into a smirk, he asks, "Happy now, Sensei?" Yamada shakes his head, lips curling down more and more with each passing second. "But I was talking to Bakugou." "Yeah, I fucking know." Midoriya snarks, and Yamada looks terrified at Midoriya's tone of voice. "Excuse me for a moment, class," Yamada says, then walks outside, shutting the door. This action does nothing to give him privacy, as the entire class easily hears as the man shouts, presumably into his phone, "Shota! What the fresh fuck is happening to Midoriya today?" A pause, and then, "He's swearing, Sho! He never swears! Did you break him?" Inside the classroom, Midoriya doesn't even bat an eye, instead leaning his head back and shutting his eyes. Tuning out the world, he doesn't react when a clearly shaken Yamada returns, and the rest of the class is in awe at the boy's lack of reactions to Yamada's dramatic ones. Of course, there are moments that don't relate to Midoriya that are just as memorable. If one asked Jiro what her favorite part of the day was, she'd point to the many, many times that Kirishima pulled out sugar at completely random times, only to chug the packet with a slight grimace, then proceed to act like he'd gotten stronger. Aoyama adored every time that Kota threw glitter, which usually happened after a teacher said something he liked, or during breaks between classes. Sue croaked out a laugh when Ida tried speaking memes, only to utterly fail in his attempts, to the point that Kaminari broke character in order to give Ida a crash course in online humor. Some students don't stand out as much on their own, but definitely shine when next to the right person. Todoroki, for example, seemed to excel most when banking off Midoriya, complimenting the boy and actually smiling a few times. Tokiyama's character was only revealed when he followed Bakugou around, beak curving into a subtle smile as he muttered about how "You were clearly All Might's secret love child, Midoriya," which earned Tokoyami a quick scowl before Bakugou remembered himself, and instead gave a stuttered denial. And of course, there was the class that made and broke multiple students' impressions and confirmed everyone's belief that Izuku Midoriya is a terrifying actor. Foundational Hero Training. 1A heads off to their Foundational Hero Training course at long last. 20 students go to their locker rooms to change, with Uraraka having to throw Mineta into the boys' locker room before slamming the girls' door shut behind her, and everyone opens their cases without any further excitement. And then Midoriya lets out a shout. "Who the fuck let me grab the wrong case?" Midoriya shouts, and everyone blinks in surprise. First at the swearing, then at the apparent mistake, because Midoriya is holding case number 18, which is his case. Mido bro, that's not the wrong one, Kirishima points out confused. But then he lets out a squeak when Midoriya grabs him by the shirt and pulls him close. "Listen up, sugar high," Midoriya snarls, and someone snorts. "I don't know who the hell you think you are, calling me by Deku's name, but this isn't my fucking costume." Unlatching it, he points at the green jumpsuit and says, "Like I'd wear it. It's a bunny suit." None of the boys seem to know whether to laugh or cry at that, so they just stare at him as he turns to Bakugou, yanking the boy's case out of his hands before shoving his own in its place. The blonde in question glares at Midoriya for a moment, then quickly fixes his face into a pathetic frown before nodding, rushing to get into costume. Are we supposed to swap outfits?" Hanta asks, getting a few shrugs in return. "I refuse to wear that cloak," Aoyama says bluntly, pointing at Tokoyami's outfit. "There's no shine." "I don't think I can fit into my outfit," Ida says, awkwardly chopping his hand. "Bunch of wimps," Midoriya complains, and then he scowls as he pulls out the gauntlets that come with Bakugou's outfits. Bakugou looks over, eyes narrowing as he looks at the gear, his own hands holding the arm braces that Midoriya normally wears. The Class 1A boys freeze, wondering if these two will break character over this. They wouldn't continue if it meant risking damage to themselves. Would it? Luckily, Midoriya seems to have a way to get around this issue without letting up on the snarky personality. Scowl and growling, he says, "Deku, give me those stupid braces." "Yes, Kachan," Bakugou replies, forcing the stutter as he holds out the requested pieces in return. Midoriya shoves the gauntlets at Bakugou. "You can carry these around. Maybe you'll actually be able to throw better hits after carrying the extra weight," Midoriya comments rudely, after pulling the braces on and stomping out the locker room. Bakugou quickly follows. It is a rather odd sight to see Bakugou in a green jumpsuit that's a few inches too small, with his normal gauntlets and boots. Todoroki blushes as he pulls on his own costume, and Kirishima looks at him oddly. "What's up with you?" Kirishima asked, and Todoroki avoids eye contact. Baku bro looks extra manly today." Todoroki gets out, and Kirishima laughs at the impression. As it turns out, the girls have similar reactions to the sight of Midoriya in the explosive teen's tank top and including hero outfit. Midoriya, for his part, simply huffs and looks away, acting as if he's unaffected by that attention. All Might blinks at the outfits, looking between Midoriya and Bakugou, with a quickly growing, confused face. "Young Midoriya," All Might starts, and then is promptly cut off by Bakugou's cheerful, "Yes, All Might?" All Might looks at Bakugou with apprehension, then rubs his eyes. "Young Bakugou?" he asks warily. "What do you want?" Midoriya asks, and All Might actually takes a step back, much to the growing delight of 1A. I may need to see Recovery Girl," All Might admits to the class sheepishly. "I do believe I've hit my head on something." Nonsense, All Might, Uraraka shouts, chopping her hands through the air. Our peers are simply doing an assignment, and there's nothing to be concerned about. This seems to bring brief relief to the hero, who chuckles awkwardly before finally starting the lesson. Things, of course, only go worse from here, mainly because All Might decides the day will be focused on sparring, specifically quirk fights. Unfortunately, when All Might calls out the pairs, he uses their real names, which means most of the students don't go to where the teacher tells them to. A few do, but that's only because they're set to fight one another, namely Sero and Ojiro, and of course, Bakugou and Midoriya. All Might has the bright idea to have everyone watch individual matches, stating that they can all improve by seeing what their peers do correctly and incorrectly, which means that everyone sees the shit show that promptly goes down the moment Bakugou and Midoriya's fight begins. Really, with how spot on Midoriya has been all day, no one should have been surprised that Midoriya would change his fighting style to match Bakugou's. But despite this obvious leap, everyone was still stunned when Midoriya charged forward, immediately starting with the infamous right hook. That's Bakugou's opening move, Uraraka mutters, eyes widening in awe as Bakugou leaps out of the way, clearly confused by the movement, and apparently irritated, if his narrowed eyes are anything to go by. That's so manly, Todoroki whispers when Midoriya dodges Bakugou's right hook, letting out a taunting, "Trying to copy me, you shitty nerd?" As if I'm that predictable. "Oh shit," Kaminari murmurs, once more breaking character. He's roasting Bakugou. "I don't talk like that," Shoji murmurs through one of his extra limbs, then realizing his mistake and wincing. The fight only devolves from there, Midoriya throwing out insults and goading Bakugou, riling up the blonde as he effortlessly leads the fight. A few gasps can be heard when Midoriya mimics Bakugou's explosive fight by flicking his fingers at the ground, using bursts of air to shoot himself above Bakugou, in a precise motion that helps him land a solid hit on the blonde. "Motherfucker," Bakugou shouts, and Midoriya laughs. "Look at that, the nerd's got a mouth on him." Smiling cruelly, he says, "And here I thought it was beaten out of you, years ago." And everyone knows that line is a killing blow when Bakugou freezes, only to restart with a shriek of rage and an explosive punch. Everyone winces, worried for Midoriya, only to be soothed when the boy easily pins Bakugou, knocking him to the ground. "Looks like you're still below me, huh?" Midoriya says, voice contemplative yet cocky, smirking cruelly. "I'm not surprised. You've always been a pebble underneath my feet." In the blink of an eye, Midoriya is thrown off Bakugou, the blonde shoving the greenette to the floor before storming off, leaving Midoriya on the ground. As Bakugou stomps away, screaming incoherently, All Might can only turn to Midoriya with a concerned expression. "Are you quite all right, my boy?" All Might asks, and the class watches as Midoriya turns with a sneer. "I am not your boy." Midoriya snarls, teeth exposed, and then scoffs as he pulls himself off the ground. "As if I'd ever be related to you." Uraraka can't help but break character in order to console the number one hero, who, despite knowing that Midoriya and Bakugou have swapped personalities, seems hurt by the words. All Might would later admit to Midoriya that he had indeed been wounded by the scathing insults, to which Midoriya would apologize with an overabundance of tears. Midoriya, for his part, just stomps away from the sad hero, angrily muttering about how stupid Deku tried to impersonate me. As if on cue, the bell rings, ending the period. Awkwardly, the rest of 1A heads to the changing rooms, then to their classroom, wondering what their teacher will say upon their return. Aizawa sighs as he looks over his notes. Observations he's noticed, and comments he'd received from his co-workers, written down for him to factor in his student's final score for the day. Glancing up, he scans his 20 students, all of whom are currently working silently, and then recalls what he had seen and heard. Most did well. It was a fun activity, he supposes, so that makes sense. Of course, most of them had flaws in their performances. Some, like Ashido, had an unfortunate habit of breaking character, especially when they thought they wouldn't be noticed. The morning was especially bad, as it was obvious that the early students had assumed he was actually sleeping, as if he'd missed their first attempts at acting like someone else. He'd have to talk to those students, make sure that they understand that the moments that they think that they were safe are actually the most dangerous ones, as that is when an enemy can get the jump on them. And then there are those like Todoroki, who didn't quite act well enough. Sure, Todoroki said all the right phrases, and even stuck to the right friends once he knew who he was supposed to be with for the part. But the emotion was non-existent. Words and actions weren't always enough, emotions, fake or not. But that was also part of the equation when it comes into personas. And of course, then there are those who would reduce assigned classmates to one-off jokes or vague representations, while Kirishima's random consumption of sugar did clarify who he was. Sato is much more than that. Hell, if Kirishima had just mentioned a new episode from some random baking show, he would have been much better off than he is now, having downed at least 30 packets of sugar. Finally, there are those who cracked after seeing how they were portrayed, like Bakugou, which in the blonde's case is quite disappointing, because Bakugou had been doing quite well. The boy had been nearly flawless in his execution of Midoriya's little tricks and actions. From the stuttering to the poorly done tie, if their sparring match hadn't been against one another, and Bakugou hadn't seen how Midoriya had immediately copied his fighting style, which Aizawa will get back to, because that was impressive. Dare you think it, he likely would have gone the entire day without folding. He would have been competing with Midoriya for the perfect score, but instead, Aizawa had to dock points off for the final reaction. Which brings Aizawa to the one student who did perfectly, Izuku Midoriya, set up to be Katsuki Bakugou. To be honest, Aizawa hadn't expected Midoriya to do so well. Midoriya is a rather timid boy most of the time, and always flinching away from sudden movements and questioning himself. But apparently most of the time doesn't include when Midoriya has to act, because Midoriya had come in, metaphorical guns blazing, going so far as to be late in order to make a grand entrance. From there, Midoriya had acted just like his peer, from the cursing to the casual, slouched posture that Bakugou always had. Doesn't Midoriya have an analysis notebook? Aizawa wonders, recalling a few mentions of the thing. He's pretty sure that it's about quirks, but Aizawa wouldn't be surprised to hear if it's got more than just that by now. And considering Midoriya has known Bakugou for years, and the two coming from the same middle school, and likely the same elementary school as well. Well, if Midoriya had been analyzing for that long, it's not too big of a stretch to see how Midoriya was able to copy the boy so perfectly. Although a part of Aizawa is concerned about what apparently happened at the end of the fight. Midoriya's comments were worrying, to say the least. He'll have to talk to the boy soon, but that was for another day. At least he scared the shit out of Hisashi, Aizawa smirks, nodding to himself. Aizawa gives Midoriya all 3 prizes, the perfect score, extra credit, and a note that gives him free pass to get out of any assignment he wants. Aizawa doubts the boy will actually use it, but he's earned it, Acting like Bakugou must have been tough, straying so far away from his own nature and having to face the surprised reactions of his teachers without so much as flinching. Actually, Aizawa wonders how Midoriya would fare acting as someone newer to him. With Bakugou, the boy had years to study his person. If only he had known the subject for a few months, and doesn't see them out of school. Midoriya, Aizawa calls out, just as the bell rings, with the day ending and the problem child finally listening to the sound of his actual name. Stay for a moment, will you? Midoriya nods, and Aizawa watches as the class empties out. It's only when the two of them are remaining that Aizawa smirks and asks, Midoriya, how would you like to impersonate someone else tomorrow? Midoriya's eyes spark with anticipation, and a question falling from his lips automatically. Who will it be, sensei? Midoriya asks, and Aizawa hums. Myself, Aizawa answers, and Midoriya's shaky smile quickly turns into a wide grin. I'd be honored, Midoriya says, and Aizawa finds himself mirroring the boy's expression. Perfect, Aizawa says, and internally he thinks, I can't wait to see how this goes. It goes wonderfully. Aizawa has to hide his smirk when Midoriya walks into class, seconds before the bell, with a mug of coffee in his hand and a spare capture up and around his neck, which Aizawa hadn't even given him. How did Midoriya get that, with a tired expression worn on his face? Instantly, the silence is replaced by a multitude of questions, the rest of 1A trying to understand this change of events. Midoriya glares at the class. Aizawa almost chokes because Midoriya's eyes seem to have a glint that darken, despite the boy not having a quirk to do that. Silence or you're out, Midoriya says, and the room falls quiet, except for one. Why do you get to dress up again? Mineta asks, and Midoriya sighs and points at the door. Get out. You're expelled. The class devolves into pandemonium once again. Aizawa decides that he's completely okay with his decision. Maybe this time they'll listen to my goddamn lecture, Aizawa thinks, and if he chuckles, only one green-haired boy actually catches it. And that is quite alright. Okay, that was Assignment Personality Swap, written by Bellamont and read by the Viridian Ghost. I'm going to be doing this series every now and then between the one-shots. This series is called Personality Swap AU. It has a total of 54 works, and they're all complete. I'm not sure how often I'll keep adding to this. But yeah, I really hope you guys enjoyed. I might post some bloopers coming up of just some of my pets yelling in the background. I oftentimes have to stop the video and wait a few minutes before I can continue. Quite annoying if I'm on a time crunch, but that video might be up soon, who knows. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed watching this. Please check out the author. The fanfic will be linked in the description. Send all your love there. I'm just reading this. I haven't written these. See you guys next time. This is the Viridian Ghost signing off.